Hey Guildies, Fletch here. Today I'm going to go over part two for separating release from deployment. And previously we showed how if you make a change, then you deploy it, then that's just how you release. There's no release gates, there's no feature gates, there's no authorization, there's no phased rollouts. It's just you make a change. So when you get deployed, well, it's out there now. And I'm going to go over the second part of that, which is not a huge improvement, but it is a step in the right direction. And so let's get into it. All right, so the second version, or the updated way of doing something is versioning. So let's go ahead and just do a little bit of versioning as our example here. If you have a more mature system, you might have versioning already up here. This should be how to spell route. All right, so I'm gonna pretend this was already there, which means I need to update my postman. But I'm gonna put down here. Okay, so now we have two versions of get something, and in this version, let's not change it yet. Actually, this is pretty good to as a starting point to say, okay, we've created a v2 and it's starting off as the way that the v1 works, and we're going to change how it works. That's an okay mentality. So let's go ahead and say let's go over here. Okay, I did not get that in time, but that's okay. So this should say Marco Polo, get something should break, 404. Let's save this v1. All right, v1 works. It has a value. It's got a value right here. It's the value we expect. Let's make v2. v2, save, send. It works exactly the same. Okay, so we have a v2, and the way that you want to do this kind of development, feature development, where you're making a change, something existing. This is mainly working off of something existing. Is that you want to follow the open closed principle. So I'm not going to tell you how to do your folder structure right now. What did I just do? Did I even make a change? I'm not going to tell you how to do your folder structure. There's, everyone has their own way of doing that. So I'm just going to put it right here in its own base folder. Am I doing something weird? Open. Well, there's a couple different ways we can do this. I'm going to go ahead and do it this way. I'm going to call this v2, v2, save, control dot, move to that. It's like my folders aren't working or something. Open folder in File Explorer. Okay, I mean, I'm not running or anything. There's no reason this should be happening. So that works perfectly fine. Okay, so here we go. V2, let's just do that. There we go. Okay. All right, so we have a v2. It's implementing the same domain service, but I'm going to have it return version 2. We're not awaiting anything. We will do task.from results maybe.sum. There we go. Maybe of type string. That's task from result because I'm not awaiting anything. Okay, so the v2 will do that. What have I done here? Okay, it was just temporary. All right, so we have a v2. I'm going to then say I've created a v2 controller. Now does it work? It did. See, now it works. So this one is going to use a different iDomain service. So the code is going to be the same, but in this, I'm going to use this as a method to inject a different domain service. I'm actually not using the open close principle like I said I was supposed to be doing. Let's do that instead. There we go. People like this in different ways. I'm just going to go ahead and do it like this. I'm going to say public. Well, first of all, let's make this one. That's the constructor. Can I do virtual? I believe I can. I believe that's how this works. Okay. All right. So assuming that this service was not only doing this stuff right here, but is also doing a lot of other functional stuff. There's private methods in here. It's using all that other stuff. Then I would still be able to use those methods, but something else here. That's not even the right thing. So this is sort of a cheap version of open close principle, but it's sort of the right idea. So I'm going to then say, come over to the program, and let's say, I don't have my FeatureGate stuff that I usually have here, so that's interesting. And built in is not there's also a when injected into thing that things like Ninject have and my custom frameworks have. So open close principle is not a very good example for this. I'm going to temporarily pretend like those things exist. Just temporarily, because I want this video to be short. And bam. This is probably the easiest way to do this. All right. V2, just relies on number 2. And program. Oh, not data service, that's fine. Service V2. All right, and then the most key thing here is that we don't want to change this. Adding a virtual keyword is fine if you're going to be doing open close principle. That's not considered changing this this service. So the goal is for the open close principles, you don't want to change this. You want to be where is it? You want this service to be closed to changes but open to extension. So this doesn't have to change other than putting a virtual keyword on there, and it can be extended by creating another class that uses this as its base class. Creating a subclass uses this as a superclass, if those are the words that you like to use. Okay, so we have another API here. API version 1 should not have changed at all. As we see, there's not even a change in that at all. This, I can go ahead and make its own file. Now it just says I've added 2 new things. Now what I'd like to do instead of this, because this is more like mocking out what should be happening, is say inject iDomains. If someone asks for an iDomain service, give them back this domain service. But instead say, if someone asks for an iDomain service, if it's from controller v1, then do this. But if it was from controller v2, then do this version, something like that. But I don't have that set up right now. So we're doing open close principle. We're just creating a duplicate interface at the moment, and we're going to check this in. We're going to commit this. So what did I do? What did I modify here? Oh yeah, because I created that first and then I committed it, so I need to take that back out. Okay. separate v2 logic, commit all. All right, so v1 still does the same thing. v2 just says version 2. Okay, so what I've done here is I've made changes to the way that I want my domain service to work, and I've created a v2. This is a versioning, and versioning is one way that you can sort of try to start separating release from deployment. So what I've done is only safe if it's within your own private backend. If this is an API that's open to the public, and you want to make a change, and you have this version, a V1 version that's out there, then if you just make a V2 and deploy it, then your deployment is a release, and there's not really much of a difference from the last video. All of the users out there can now do that. Can now use this V2. The problem is that if you're doing continuous integration and delivery, if you're putting out a V2, then more than likely you put out like maybe a stub, like maybe something like return lol, something like that. And this is like, okay, we've finished the contract. We've gotten a contract out there for V2, and you're going to be making updates. So then you have your first implementation, and then your second version, you're like, oh, I misspelled it. I need to put this in here, and oh, I need to add this logic in here. So it's sort of a continuous creation of the new logic. As you write new tests, then you push out new code. You write new tests, you push out new code, and what you're telling the people is, hey, I've made this new API. What you're telling these end users to the public, I've made this new API, start using it, and it's actually not ready. You need more controls in place that will allow them to know, okay, this is a beta, this is only for beta testers, or this is only for authorized users, or we're not fully releasing this yet. It's just out there and it's not quite ready. It's not safe. It's the same thing as just releasing is the same as deploying. So this is only okay in a backend system that you control, because then your web developers or your UI developers, they can at their leisure, all that changes really V1, at their leisure, they can come and say, okay, we will change the UI to use V2. But still, now they have to wait for V2 to be completely done. So V2's out there. They can test it maybe locally in their own development workspace or something like that. But at least it's controlled. It's in your backend. And so doing versioning like this is okay. What you really want to get to is that when your UI developers or whoever's consuming this, it could be end users just directly consuming an API, is that they should be able to have code in their whatever's consuming it, their backend code or their front end code that can test this. So let me see. I'll just do it as mock. Return. Oh, I forget. I'm a little teacup. I'm gonna actually grab it. HTTP status code teacup 418. That's right. I'm a teapot. I'm a little teapot. So return status 418. So you can do something like that instead, and that will tell whoever's trying to consume this that it's still in development, or it's feature gated, or it's not ready to be used, and it can return this also conditionally. So depending on who's hitting it, if you have some sort of authorization, you have like a user that's coming in, they've got a JWT or something. And if they're not the right kind of user, they'll get back a 418. It's not ready yet. If they are the right kind of user, then they'll get back a 200 with the data. And when you have that, then the UI can program, send it up. If it's a 418, instead use the V1. Clicked on the wrong thing. Instead use the V1. But send it up, and if it comes back, then use that value, and then you're good. And then everything just works together. Whenever this ends up getting deployed, all these changes end up getting deployed, then the UI can be deployed, this can be deployed, nothing can really be done. But then once the feature gate is turned on and this no longer returns a 418, the V2 no longer returns a 418, then the UI just starts using the V2 version. And that just takes one click of one thing. So I'll talk about feature gating and other release gates later on, but you can see that there's a lot of weaknesses with just making a versioned API, if it's especially if it's something that you don't control. You're still in that mode where most of the time you get to the point of, okay, we're in a staging area. We want to wait for the UI to be done, or wait for this one to be done. And yeah, V1 and V2 are both there. We still have to document both paths, and it's still a mess. And so it's better just to do better feature gating and better release gating. So I'll get into that in the next video. And this is good if you just control your backend, but if not, then let's do the next video together.